Andrew Hewison, welcome.
Thanks, mate. Good to be here.
Mate, let's kick off. I'll give a bit of an intro to you from my knowing, but obviously we'll get you to expand on that. So, Managing Director of Hewison Private Wealth, a 40-year-old wealth advisory firm in Melbourne. You are MD and been at the organisation now for almost 25 years.
Correct.
Fair stint.
Yep. Straight out of managing a surf shop.
Yeah, good. Perfect. And married, father of three. We share that in common. Outnumbered. Health enthusiast, fitness enthusiast, surfer. Let's talk about. I'd like to start on the personal side. Tell us about your journey into Hewison and sort of what shaped you.
Well, growing up, I had no idea that this is where I'd wind up. Like a lot of young blokes, was pursuing a footy career, didn't quite get there. Then started a commerce degree, thinking I'd wind up in sport management, marketing, something along those lines. But in saying that, my father had founded Hewison Private Wealth back in 1985, and that always bubbled away in the background. And I think actually, like, my eventual interest in it sort of actually started, as I now think about it, was he used to come home after a long day, pour a scotch and just chat about his day. And it used to be the best part of my day, sitting there with mum and dad and listening to some of his stories and just his passion for helping his clients. And when I was at the crossroads, early 20s, managing the surf shop, I sort of said to him, "Hey, I'm not quite sure what I want to do next. What do you do? And maybe I should explore this. But by the way, I've only got 9 months because I'm going overseas to live in the UK for 2 years." So thankfully, he was quite patient. I spent that first 9 months working as an associate advisor, but after like 6 weeks, I reckon I knew that's exactly what I wanted to do. I've got a real passion for customer service and client service. And ultimately, that's the business we're in. We're in the relationship business, and we're in the business of delivering value to our clients and getting paid for it. And so that's really where the journey kicked off for me. I'm still qualified as an advisor today. I just don't have a client book. And was an advisor for 15 odd years. Dad retired, semi-retired, stepped away. 2015. But I would say, and we might get into this a little bit too. It's not a family business. He corporatized the model from the very, very beginning, and because he never really knew whether I was going to pursue it or not.
Sure.
And had no intentions of trying to push me or my sister into it. She worked there briefly as a client service manager. But as it so happens, I did get in there and I loved it. I'm always very quick to say I've been MD now for 11 years, but I had to apply for his position.
Yeah.
And he stepped out of that process, and I was lucky enough. But again, when he first said to me, "Hey, if you think about pursuing this as a career, as in like the MD role," I was like, hard no. Like, I've seen what you've done for 15 years and I don't want anything, I don't want anything of it. But I think, what drives me as an individual is I've just got this real passion for wanting to know what my limits are and what my potential is in all different areas of life. And I think when the dust settled on it, I'm like, well, I never thought about running a business. And back then it was a lot smaller than it is today, of course. But it made me feel uncomfortable. And as soon as I had that feeling, I'm like, this is actually what I need to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because I think the personal development is something, having known you for a really long time, is something that you've always been a bit of a champion for. And so, having said that, despite the fact that obviously your dad didn't pressure you into it, and you applied and were fortunate enough to take it on your own accord, is there still a level of pressure that you feel, given that it's still your surname on the banner on the front door? Does that have any, I don't know, extra weight?
I'm not sure what this says about me, and you're probably going to expect me to say yes, but it's a hard no.
Right.
I don't know why. I'm just like, look, I will always give everything my best shot, and, you know, I will always be there to take feedback and figure out how I can do something better. But I've just, I'm not the founder of the business. My father is the founder, and I grew up in the business working with other advisors who became and have been my business partners now for over a decade, almost 2 decades. And I just think the only pressure that I really would feel is the pressure that I probably put on myself to want to do a bloody great job. And I think if I reflect on it, I could be wrong, but if I was to say yes, it might have been because, and other people in my position might have been because it might have been pressure that they felt from their parent, mother, father, whoever it was. But whereas my father never placed any pressure on me to that degree.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so now that Hewison, now the size of it is how many head count?
We're around about 65, and I think if we were fully employed and we, say over the next 6 months or so, we might be close to 70.
Yep.
We're only in Melbourne.
Yep.
And so over the course of our journey, our focus for growth has been on organic growth.
Yep.
And it was funny because we were chatting before we kicked off. I've just come from a Macquarie conference, an advisor conference, and they asked me actually to stand up and kind of address this question around being the difference between being, what do they call it? A sustainable practice versus a scalable enterprise, wanting to pick apart the difference between organic and inorganic growth. So we've only grown organically over the years, but we were really deliberate from day one about that. We never wanted to be the biggest, but we wanted to be the best.
Yep.
And we're a wealth-only business, so we don't do accounting, legal, lending. And as an independent wealth management business, we've never been able to, or nor have we ever wanted to accept a commission. They work really well in lending, etc. But we've always been a fee-for-service business, and the vision from day dot, even to today, is not to create a business of a certain scale and then sell it off. It's about creating a legacy, and so when it's my turn to step off the merry-go-round, the baton gets carried on. It may change in the future, but that was certainly the vision for my dad, and we're still living that vision today.
Good answer. So, I mean, in your time as MD at HPW, there's been some pretty interesting events, right? You've had COVID that you've had to navigate.
I was GFC before that. I'm old, mate.
Yeah, you've done it for a bit. So tell us then about what was your leadership style and some of the things that you guys as a group implemented over these last 10 years. I mean, leadership broadly, I know it's an open question, but how would you describe your style, but also how do you guys navigate some of those challenges?
Okay, so my style is, I'd still say it's far from perfect. I'm a super passionate person, and sometimes that level of energy is a bit too much for some people sometimes. And particularly when I assumed the role, I was 35 and I had never had any previous leadership experience other than working underneath my father, who, baby boomer, founder in the mid-80s. And I'm a very emotional person, just like him as well. So they can be really great traits to have, but you can't let that get the better of you as well. And I'm very much at sort of that leadership style, particularly early on, of like, lead from the front, get on my back. I will show you the way. And I think, even to be brutally honest, early on, I think some of the 360-degree feedback I got was, you can tend to lack a little bit of empathy.
Yep. Yep.
I'm that, I think they call it like a D-type personality. Like, I'm very direct. If you walk into my office, let's go. What do you need to talk about, etc.
Yep.
And I've certainly tempered that over the years and learnt, and even through playing a lot of football early on, the coach that I started off with was that mentality. The coach that I finished with was more, okay, I need to tailor my approach to every individual because every individual responds differently. And so that's something that I've learned over the years. And I've also learned to lead with vulnerability. I think
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so teams, I believe that teams perform at their absolute best, particularly high-performing teams, perform at their absolute best when they have a deep care, knowledge, and understanding for those people that work around them. But you can't expect people to be raw, open, honest if you haven't led the way.
Sure.
And a classic example of that would be we can't sit there and say, well, we all make mistakes and we expect you to own up to a mistake when it happens if the ultimate leader of the business isn't willing to stand up there and say, I made a mistake.
Sure.
And so, or, to some degree, if someone comes in and says, how was your weekend or how are you going? First of all, don't ask them if you don't want an honest answer. And so when people actually ask me, like, I will tell them, I'm not my best today because X, Y, Z. Growing up, I've still got 3 kids. Yeah, I can't get away with this excuse too much anymore because the oldest one's 8. But having 3 really young kids, sometimes you have nights where you're not sleeping much.
No.
But if you can't sit there and be honest and share what's going on in your life, professionally and personally, you can't expect others to do the same. But I think that's ultimately where you get the most out of people when they can come to work and really feel like they can be honest and be themselves. Otherwise, turning up to work becomes pretty difficult, bit of a chore.
I want to jump on to something in a moment about the development and the leadership style and what you do from because I read there through your bio that you've taken on a new hobby as well, which I'll touch on in a minute.
Yes,
but
yeah.
You mentioned about the vulnerability and the connectivity with your team. You've now had an international team with us for a few years, and you've been one of those businesses that have really lent in. You've brought the team members out. Has that been part of the process? Has that been part of the strategy around connectivity and vulnerability and making sure that there's a level of personal connection? Has that been a focus?
Yeah. So even just parking the vulnerability aspect for a second, and touching on our growth as a leadership team over the last 10 years. So we have an annual staff conference every year, and you're right. We have previously brought out our international team to join us. At one of those conferences in around 2018, we developed a new set of values, fun, family, empowerment, and then more recently we added sort of the unwritten one, which was excellence. And so touching on that empowerment piece, we have never treated our team as, kind of a hierarchical structure where you've got people that sit at the very bottom that don't have a say in anything. We have these staff conferences as an example, and empowerment becomes super important. So the expectation is that every person's contribution is equal. The person that's been there for 2 minutes in admin versus me who's been there for 20 years have the inputs that we provide, the suggestions, they're all treated equally. And that enables all of our people, in some respects, if they want to take on a leadership kind of role without a title. And that's something I'm also really, really big on, leading without a title. But you have to encourage your people to be able to do that. Otherwise, they'll look at the titles and go, I'm not going to say anything.
Safe space.
Yeah. And so as it relates to our overseas team, and I will say a lot of it was based on your advice. When we first partnered with you and we said, well, you tell us, how do we make this successful? And obviously, there's varying levels of whether you want to take on board all the advice or not. But ultimately, it was the more you can integrate your overseas team into your onshore team and make them feel like they're a part of it, the better success you're going to have.
Totally.
And so I'll give you a couple of examples. Like on a Monday morning, we've got a team meeting, and we pick 2 people out of a hat to host the team meeting, and our offshore team are involved in that process. So it could be Priya one week, or it could be Eunice another week, in conjunction with someone working onshore, and they'll host the meeting just like anybody else.
How good.
And that's definitely the feedback that we've received from them along the journey. But I will say this, hand on heart, they also sort of not just speak incredibly highly of AS White, but the proof's in the pudding when I see the posts that they put up, say on LinkedIn, about the weekend away that you took them away on their own, conference or whatever it might be. So, AS White incorporating them into one of your family and then us doing the same, it speaks volumes for their loyalty back to the business.
I want to change gears to the development side of things. Now, I didn't bring any black belt, green belt with me today, or the boxing gloves. But you've recently taken on a new hobby.
Yeah.
And you talk about getting out of your comfort zone. What have you gone and done?
The one thing that every broken arrow in their mid-40s should not do, and I've taken on a martial art. So I took on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu about 18 months ago. Why did I do that? I actually started pre-COVID for 3 months and loved it, and then that faded away, and I've sort of come back to it. Again, it's like that's probably the one element where I've never done it before, and I've never put myself into that uncomfortable situation. The reality is, you don't. No one should ever go looking for a confrontation, but sometimes a confrontation might come and find you. And the first thing is, first principle is, disarm at all costs.
Sure.
But it's not the only reason for it, but I think that particular discipline has always really intrigued me. I mean, I actually do love to watch the UFC, and you see sort of what they can, and it's like, this thing's like, it's like human chess, like it's physical chess. And some of the most humbling experiences I've had over the last 18 months have been in that environment. So I've got 2 stripes on the white belt. I'm going for blue by the end of this year. But yeah, like as I said, a spinal fusion, a shoulder reconstruction, a wrist reconstruction, arthritis in my wrist. Pretty good reasons why I probably shouldn't do it, but then it's also a really good reason why you have to keep moving. Otherwise, Your body just will seize up even more.
Tell us about one thing I'm always really curious about is how leaders balance, and I don't think, I'll preface this by saying that I don't think necessarily there is a right and wrong answer to it, but how do you go about balancing your family, personal, your health and business? Do you have a structure? Is there a couple of rules you live by?
It's a great question. I'm probably not as maybe, structured in terms of like, I'm going to write this down and I'm assigning a certain amount of time to something. Like, I just know that I know what I need to do to get to be the best version of myself. And it starts with physical activity. So it's just something I've always done. I identify with being physically fit, healthy. Again, that's an element of like, can I get the best out of myself in that area? And if I'm not addressing those things, then I'm a pretty poor version of myself for everybody else.
Yep.
I'm always interested by this concept of like work-life balance. I would say I don't even want to say I'm not great at it, but at this point in time, I'm probably more aligned to the philosophy of there's no such thing.
Yep.
Particularly in my position. And I always remember my dad, when I was asking him about this role, what it would take to be successful, and he said, well, you're always on. Like, you'll be mowing the lawn and you'll be thinking about how you can do something to improve your business, or I need to have a conversation with someone. And at the time I was like, oh, that's not what I want to do. Like, I want, my time, this, that, and the other. But it's like, you almost don't get a choice if you become, and I'm all in on something that, BJJ or surfing or family, I'm all in. when it relates to my leadership role and my role at Hewison Private Wealth, I'm all in, which just means you just have to make sure. I'll say this, going back to my point before, like my family obviously is number one, and I'm afforded the flexibility in my role because I can basically set the tone and structure myself so that I address that, and I love that. And then it's okay, well, becoming really efficient with my time. Where am I going to get my hour 5 days a week to do my physical activity, and then throw in a bit of BJJ on top of that. But then that allows me to get into the office and be the best version of myself for everybody else. So it's a little bit unstructured, but I just know what are the priorities in my life that I need to address. And the old adage of like, if you can't fill up your own cup, how can you fill up other people's? If you're empty, you've got nothing to give other people. That's basically my philosophy.
Yeah, totally. The changing tack for a sec. So let's talk about the international team. You've had a solid team there now for a number of years, and we ASW have been fortunate to partner with lots of industry leaders like yourselves. Many share some of the same concerns before they go down this path. For you guys, what were those perceived barriers before you went down it?
Look, it's not going to be new, and I'm sure others will have shared this already. It's pretty basic. It has been a while now, but the first one was security of data.
Yep.
And I think COVID changed that a lot. We had probably only switched to kind of the cloud, Office 365, etc. Maybe it was a year to 18 months beforehand. There obviously would have been businesses that had to do it on the fly, and I don't envy them at all. But when you think about your business being operated, therefore, like in the cloud, which is crazy to think what it was like before that, because it was basically like, USBs were like the biggest risk.
Yeah.
Stick in that's the only way you could get data out of your system, is put it onto a stick.
Yeah.
And I think I still remember having conversations with you back then, and you would have been having them with a lot of people, like, how do you ensure that the computers that they are using over there and entry into the offices is secure? And I remember people saying, I don't know whether it was you saying, we cover up the USB port so you can't put a USB stick in the computer.
They're all disabled. Every USB port's disabled.
Yeah, which is mad when you think about that now. Yeah. But so as soon as we kind of got over that, and I think the other thing too was, okay, well, do we have the appropriate processes and procedures internally to be able to brief the offshore team appropriately so that they were set up to succeed? And I would hazard a guess and say that if it doesn't work out with an offshore team or an offshore person, it's because they weren't given enough visibility around what their role was, policies and procedures wise, for them to be able to follow to be successful. And then, but again, like the other one was probably going to be, well, who's managing them? It was like, well, who manages your onshore stuff? Like, it's no different. You're not going to employ someone onshore and go, well, just you're over there. No one's going to check up on you, and no one's going to look at what you're doing. Like, it's ridiculous. So once we kind of got over those three main questions and dipped our toe in the water and had early success, which I think was with Marcus in our risk team, I think we've never looked back.
No, and I think you've also created a team there that have become quite passionate and loyal to Hewison as well, given that, the opportunity to travel out here, work day to day with your guys. I think that not only to your word before, part of ASW's family, but they would certainly feel like they're part of HPW's family as well. So,
and we've never done this, thankfully. But I also think I would assume that a recipe for disaster would be, if you treat them like a second-class citizen, then I think they're still going to give you the best work that they can, but they're probably not going to stick around for long because there are others that are going to treat them a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, again, it sounds quite harsh when I say that because people wouldn't do that necessarily like deliberately, but subconsciously, perhaps that's how people people could be treated. Well, and I would say that was still probably, even in the early stages, again, just understanding the relationship between your onshore and your offshore team and how it would actually work. You opened my eyes up, particularly around how you know I don't know, treated is probably, for want of a better term, but how you treated your team over there and how you managed them. And that was a really early lesson for us to go, oh no, this is how part of the success is. I think when I said to you, hey, how does it work? And you're like, well, they're just based in another country. We've now got a staff member in WA and a staff member in Sydney. It's absolutely no different.
Yep.
They're a part of the team, and you treat them accordingly, and you get the results and the rewards back.
Did you guys have a lot of work to do onshore with your leadership team in preparation for the international team in regards to conversation and bringing them along for the journey? Or do you think they were all pretty much eager and keen from the outset?
It's a good question. I just recall having some conversations with our board, a couple of our independent board directors, one of them who was our chair at the time, that just, we were chatting off camera a little bit about the adoption of AI at the moment and,
Sure.
and how people just go through, and some people move through these phases faster than others around, they fear what they don't really understand. And so, again, taking it slowly and bringing them along on the journey, very, very quickly got over some of those fears and insecurities about how this would work.
Yep. Good answer. And I think a lot of businesses, irrespective of size, have a similar path.
Mm.
I think most businesses tend to slowly but surely test the waters, build capability, stop, breathe. Is it working well? Great. And then everyone all of a sudden is the biggest fans.
Yep.
And pretends like they're on board from the start. Now, one of the things I wanted to touch on here was one of the things we like to do here is every guest who comes on asks a question for the next guest, right? But I also like to flip that question back on the person who asked it as well. So your question, which if you knew you had a year to live, how would it change your attitude to life? So I want you. That's your question for the next, but I'm going to flip it back onto you. How would you answer that question?
That's not fair. You really stumped me.
I know.
I reckon. Okay, I think the learning that I can draw on, and I'm not saying I live it today because who does, but when this whole COVID thing came along, and we were seeing, whether they were made up or not, some pretty disturbing images coming out of China about how this thing could affect people, and having a genuine fear in the early stages about what was going on. I reckon that's when I took a moment to pause around what on earth was really, really important. And I just remember some of the messages and phone calls to my parents at the time, just to talk about how much care, how careful they needed to be, and et cetera. So I think all of the stuff that you might aspire towards around possessions just completely disappears. And so I just think, if I knew, and I chose that a year because I don't think a day is like realistic. Like I could have, we do it for your last day. Well, shit, I've got 24 hours, like hang out with my wife and my kids. But a year is like, well, I better write a bucket list of every place that I want to take my family and every experience that I want to have with my family. I think that's what it would be focused on, like structured bucket list. And I'd probably, you know what? I'd probably sell all of my stuff, because you can't take it with you. It's not important. And when you go, you're just going to leave it for everyone else to divvy up. So why don't you just get rid of it straight away, or hand it off straight away so that you die with nothing?
Love it. Love it. Huey, what's a question that we haven't asked you that you think we could have? That might be worth sharing. The business, family, management, leadership, anything.
Look, I do. It's funny because I don't know, I pose this question, but I do think it's probably another question. I don't know whether you should ask me because of whether I've got the answer, but like, where do you see yourself, you and your life in 10 years? And I don't probably see it as part of Hewison Private Wealth because, as we mentioned earlier, I have been there for almost 25 years, and I just, again, probably tapping into that, my character. I think you've got to also be mindful of when is the right time to also step away, and let someone else carry on with whether it's with more energy or different ideas or whatever it might be. But I've never seen myself like eventually I know there'll be other things that I just want to test myself in.
Sure.
And also with a young family as well, like you want the best for your family.
Totally.
And I can overthink things. So I love it. I actually really admire people that it just can be really clear on what they want, where they want to go, and they don't stop to think about whether they should have taken a different path. I sort of struggle with that a little bit because I just always want the very best for me and for everybody else and myself. But my wife and I always sort of said, not joked about it, but like, I love my surfing, and it's like, well, where do you want to be in 10 years' time? I'm like, well, I'd love to be able to be lucky enough to wake up and be staring at my favourite surf break, where I can go out for a surf with my kids and whatnot. So that would have been a challenging question for me to answer, which is I'm probably answering it on the spot. Don't know if that helps or not.
No, it does. Yeah, it does. On the offshore team, finishing on the offshore team thing for a second, if you had to give advice to a business that was maybe contemplating or considering the offshore staffing thing, what advice would you give?
Oh, I think first of all, you should be clear on what the problem is that you're trying to solve. Don't be naive enough to think that problem or gap can't be filled or has to be filled with someone onshore. But in saying that, it's about leverage. So it's not about cost savings. That game's dead. It used to be about that, or that's when this whole thing started. That's not to say that if you're struggling to find, and I'll be completely honest about this, in a world where we're struggling with productivity, like if you're struggling to fill a role with someone onshore who has the right attitude or is productive enough, well, maybe you could fill that with two people overseas that have a much, much better attitude towards the job.
Yep.
But ultimately, it's more about how you can look offshore to find the skills and attributes necessary to leverage your onshore team. And that it depends on what business you're in, but assuming it might be a services-based business, are there high value, or it's not really about value, but like highly repetitive tasks that maybe it's just not efficient to have them completed, but you've got client-facing people who should be spending more time with clients or on the phone with clients, etc., that are being hamstrung because they've got to be the ones that sit there and complete those tasks. But if you could find, perhaps someone in an offshore scenario who can add value in those areas, that just frees up your onshore team.
Good answer. Thanks, Huey.
Thank you, mate. Great to see you.
Appreciate
Thank you very much.